Okay, we'll start with this. Another look at the resurgence of controversial Olympian Emain Khelif at what is an amateur tournament in the Netherlands set to go down over the summer months under the auspices of World Boxing, the newly founded organization intended to oversee all of the amateur boxing in the absence of AIBA that has so been stripped of recognition by the IOC. Upon this organization's inception and hearing about them, I wondered what would be their stance on Emain Khelif? What would be their stance on Lin Yuting? Would they implement safeguards to prevent situations like last year's situation? The resurgence of this athlete at an amateur tournament in the Netherlands would provide the answer. Did World Boxing not see the controversy, the outrage, the reactions to this fighter last year? That they are now allowing the fighter to continue to compete. Why was nothing done? And I think a big problem is World Boxing is a relatively new organization, and they've got so much to focus on now. The preservation of the amateur boxing scene and its entry into the Olympic Games, that they may not want to rock the boat, at least not right now. It's too soon. That if they would have denied Emain Khelif entry into these tournaments, they themselves may have been denied entry into the Olympic Games. That if the IOC thought enough of these fighters, Emain Khelif and Lin Yuting, if they thought enough of them to let them medal in those games, if World Boxing would have taken a hardline stance on them, the IOC might have taken a hardline stance on World Boxing. That might be what they are afraid of. So many are afraid to speak. Where, at least at this moment, World Boxing's focus is ensuring the preservation of boxing at the Olympic Games, and maybe later on, they will tackle those issues. It would be presumptuous to label this entire fiasco a trans rights issue when Emain Khelif does not identify as a trans person. But outside of the boxing space, that was the theme in the last Olympics. Biological males competing in categories traditionally designated for biological women. So we don't know that this isn't a push from the IOC to blur the lines that distinguish these categories. The lines that separate the XX athletes from the XY athletes, which brings forward a question. If you are going to blur those lines, then why have categories at all? And why does this only seem to disproportionately affect the women's categories and not the men? The answer is obvious. It's because they're easier to take advantage of. A biological male has a physical advantage over a biological female. Do you think that either Lauren Price or Michaela Mayer, Sandy Ryan, in the women's welterweight category punch as hard as Jaron Ennis does in the men's category? This is not subject to belief. This is measurable. Do you think they punch with as many pounds per square inch as a Brian Norman? Do you think they can exert the same amount of force as a biological male? You know the answer. We all do. Making these practices all the more unethical, divisive, and insidious, especially as it pertains to boxing, which is a contact sport. This is not shot put. This is not pole vaulting, swimming, or track and field. These athletes go in there and pummel each other. Allowing a biological male to compete against biological females constitutes an unfair advantage that directly affects the state of play, irrespective of one individual or some individuals' identity politics, because that's what this boils down to. This entire Emain Khelif situation has been co-opted by a community the fighter doesn't even claim to be a part of, but they're the only ones arguing in that fighter's favor.
Yeah, because they're not the ones taking the punches.
They're not the ones watching years of hard work, climbing up the ranks and fighting in those amateur tournaments all fall by the wayside because of somebody else's ideology.
Philosophy.
What are the unwitting participants in this progressive clown show pushing an ideology that there's no real difference between a biological male and a biological female, then why are there categories in the first place?
That a biological male competing amongst biological females' only advantage is that he's a better athlete?
That's how I've seen it packaged. That the difference between an Emain Khelif and a Luka Hamori is that Emain is just a better athlete.
Oh, because being biologically male has nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with the disparity between them. A Clarissa Shields is a head and shoulders better fighter and better athlete than a Vanessa Joanese, but they are both XX athletes.
If Clarissa is head and shoulders above the other fighters in her division, those are still XX fighters, just like she is.
And that's not the same thing as a biological male competing in a biologically female category, designated for biological females. The argument in favor of these practices is little more than disingenuous perspectives mixed with semantics.
If this continues,
And let's hope that it doesn't, but if by some chance it does, and more fighters like Emain Khelif are medaling in the Olympic Games, what you might find is more amateurs might decide to go pro earlier to get away from this stuff, because there's no place for it in the paid ranks and they won't have to put up with it.
That's what some fighters might elect to do. Go pro sooner. The other fighters that come in just behind an Emain Khelif.
That if a fighter like Emain wins the gold, and a biological female wins the silver, a biological female wins the bronze, to a lot of people, the silver medalist will be the gold medalist, the bronze medalist will be the silver medalist.
That'll be the perception.
And the promotional outfits looking to sign these amateur standouts out of the Olympic Games will operate on that assumption. The paid ranks are a different beast to the amateurs. Marketability plays a great deal, and Emain Khelif is not marketable, nor is any other fighter like that.
Why do you think they're still fighting in amateur tournaments after going gold? Didn't Emain Khelif say they were going to go pro?
You're still wondering why they didn't? It's because Algeria is not one of the preeminent markets within the boxing space. Not in the paid ranks, and in the paid ranks, in the preeminent boxing markets, there's no audience for this. There's no audience that wants to see a guy, or somebody who's perceived as being a guy, pounce on a girl.
The trans rights activists that are going up to bat for Emain Khelif are not actually consumers of boxing. They don't actually watch it, spend any money on it.
Some things change, but other things stay the same. And the primary customer base for boxing, whether it's in the UK, the US, or someplace else, are still men.
Men don't want to see this shit. Men are not going to put up with this. You're not going to force us to watch it.
But if the question is, why is this new organization, why is World Boxing allowing this? It's likely because they're still in their infancy, they just formed, they just got recognition from the IOC, and they don't want to rock the boat. Maybe in the future they will implement safeguards, but right now, it's too early.
Over to the men's super featherweight division, where earlier today in the land of the rising sun, Sugar Nuñez took on Masanori Rikiishi for what was the vacant IBF title left behind by then-champion Anthony Kakache, who did not want to comply with the IBF's order to face Sugar for obvious reasons. He fought an inactive Lee Wood instead.
Won the fight and managed to extend his career in the process of staying out of harm's way. I think Sugar would have knocked him out.
Yeah, I think Sugar would have beat him up. Instead, he ended up beating Masanori Rikiishi. You can see Eddie Hearn over there on the right-hand side wearing his cocaine cowboy shirt.
Fast Car Eddie got to sit in for a treat as Sugar Nuñez applied unrelenting pressure on Masanori Rikiishi. Rikiishi got off to a halfway decent start. I would say that he probably picked up the first 3 or 4 rounds before the pace finally started to catch up to him.
You will notice that Masanori Rikiishi is an unusually tall super featherweight. He's got a lot of height, a lot of length, showed a lot of movement, staying on the perimeter of the ring, working off the counter, walking Sugar Nuñez into punches. He got in with a few good ones that seem to have gotten Sugar's attention. They're both strong punchers.
Though in this fight, There was a clear aggressor and a clear defender. Masanori Rikiishi on the balls of his feet, on the move, moving lateral, and staying on the perimeter of the ring as Sugar Nuñez, the noticeably shorter, stumpier, stockier fighter of the two, closed the distance to get in with shots. I think Masanori's generous physical dimensions are the only reason he heard the final bell. Long legs make for long strides, so you can cover a lot of ground in a few steps, and Masanori showed great movement,
putting distance between himself and Sugar, and in effect taking something off of Sugar's punches since he's moving away from the action and not towards it, simultaneously showing good durability whenever punches did get in.
Noticed a lot of body work from Sugar Nuñez. That was very smart of him to periodically go to Masanori's midsection. Guy with a torso that long, it's a big target, and when the target is a moving target, that's where you want to go. Go to his body, take his legs away. Eventually, round after round, the pace starts to catch up to Masanori, and he's having a tougher time keeping Sugar off of him.
Dwyer!
The ring can seem like a very small place when you're in there with an unrelenting pressure fighter like a Sugar Nuñez, who also happens to have a very good engine, able to keep up that pace into the later rounds, which he did.
Now, Rikiishi and Sugar are both strong punchers, but there was a noticeable disparity whenever Sugar lands a punch and whenever Rikiishi lands a punch. Rikiishi got Sugar's attention here and there, but the heavier shots were coming from Sugar.
You got the sense that Sugar can knock this guy out. He can put him down. If not for Rikiishi's constant movement, this fight wouldn't have went the distance. Sugar Nuñez is one of the harder punchers in the super featherweight division. Not the kind of guy you want to stand right in front of. Rikiishi didn't.
But he still got beat.
And so Sugar Nuñez has become IBF super featherweight champion, one of 4 champions at this weight.
There is Sugar holding the IBF, but there is also Oshaki Foster holding the WBC, Lamont Roach holding the WBA, and Emmanuel Navarrete holding the WBO. Don't get too used to these faces, as the landscape at 130 could change very soon. Oshaki is rumored to be facing Stephen Fulton in his very next fight. Lamont, as we all know, is set to fight Gervonta Davis for a second time, and Emmanuel,
after getting saved from Charlie Suarez in his last fight, there is talk that Emmanuel might leave 130, move up to 135 since he's struggling to make 130. So even though there are 4 champions now, the belts could end up changing hands in the not-so-distant future. I heard some mention of a potential Raymond Ford fight.
Raymond Ford, the former WBA featherweight champion who has since moved up in weight and is campaigning as a super featherweight now.
A fantastic fight, if they can make that fight, as both fighters are with Matchroom, so it would be an in-house fight theoretically, an easy fight to make, but a difficult fight to call. Raymond has had 1 or 2 fights at Super Feather since moving up. He hasn't knocked those guys out, he hasn't stopped them, but he has looked good, he has looked sharp, and this is a healthier weight for him, though I'm not completely sure he can hold back the onslaught from Sugar Nuñez, who's just a bigger, meaner, stronger version of Nick Ball.
I mean, that's what this fight would look like. This fight would be another version of the Nick Ball fight that Raymond had right before he left 126. And you'll remember, he didn't win that fight.
Now, it's important to note that before Raymond left 126, he was struggling to make the weight, so that's a factor as well, that Sugar would be facing a more energized and healthy Raymond Ford than Nick Ball faced.
But the pendulum swings both ways. Raymond would be facing a bigger, better, meaner, and stronger pressure fighter than Nick Ball.
You didn't beat Nick Ball. Are you going to beat Sugar Nuñez? It's a 50-50 fight where the edge in physicality has to go to Sugar. He's got the better engine. I think he's a bigger puncher.
Raymond has to box him. Raymond has to box him up. He's got to out-hustle him because I don't think he can out-muscle him.
So maybe we can expect to see this in either late summer or early fall. Like I said, they're both with Matchroom, so theoretically, it should be an easy fight to make. Congratulations to Sugar.
Azúcar!
All right, we got a new drama in boxing involving Teofimo Lopez, Haney, and Boots, and it is crazy. Teofimo has been calling for a fight with 147-pound unified champ Duran Ennis for a while now. Even Turki has confirmed that he wanted to see this. Boots versus Teofimo. This is a tweet from January 18th, This is something that Turki wanted to make. He wanted to make this fight. Here's the thing. We heard a lot from Teofimo's side. A lot of tweets, but nothing from Enes's side. Nothing. Radio silence. Then these types of stories emerged. That Eddie Hearn advises Boots to move to 154. Boots Ennis doesn't seem like he wants to fight with Teofimo. Wants to go to 154 because he's too big for 147. And then come the Teofimo tweets saying that Boots has declined. Turki Al-Sheikh is upset with Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn was told that this was a fight that Turki wanted. Teofimo then says he's been fired. Probably had something to do with this tweet right here. And then Dan Rayfield tweets that Teofimo versus Devin Haney was agreed to for August 16th until Teofimo's tweet storm. This is a soap opera. Boxing is a soap opera. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I saw this whole thing play out yesterday, but I held off on reacting to it because you never know. By the time that this video is uploaded, Turki and Teo may have smoothed things over. Who knows?
Remember that before Turki and Canelo went into business with each other, they didn't have the best relationship. They were at odds with each other, but eventually they worked it out. So Teo and Turki could eventually work it out.
There's talk of a Devin Haney fight in August. And that might happen, you never know, because Devin needs somebody to fight. Now that Ryan's lost to Rolly Romero and Teo, he ain't gonna be fighting Boots.
Boots might be moving up.
So if this accents anything to me, it's Teofimo's tumultuous nature. It's how Teofimo seems to have a penchant for biting the hand that feeds him. Because he had issues with Top Rank, he had issues with Matchroom, now he seems to be having issues with Turki.
Where what it looks like to me is, you don't have issues, you are the issue. You don't seem to get along with anybody that you work with, and I happen to think that Turki is a lot more accommodating than Top Rank, a lot more accommodating than Matchroom.
You got a good thing going here. You screw it up, you're gonna be back to fighting at the Hulu Theater in front of under 5,000 people on a Top Rank show. This is your best bet to get at the kind of money you've been looking for, and you might screw all that up.
He called Turki a dictator. You're a willing participant. If Turki's gonna pay you a fortune...
You don't think he's supposed to get something out of it? The guy that's putting up all the money to make things happen should have no requests. He should just put money in your pocket. See, that's the fighter's mentality these days, that they should always get something.
Well, they should always get more. I don't play them, the violin, anywhere near as much as some content creators because I know that the fighters are temperamental, the fighters are often childish and selfish.
In the case of Teofimo Lopez deluded, he tried to blame Matchroom for his loss to George Kambosos. Like we didn't watch that fight with our own two eyes. Then he went from blaming Matchroom to blaming the flu or whatever he had going on at the time.
He said he got fired.
So we don't actually know what the state of the Devin Haney fight is at this time, but like I said, by the time that this video is uploaded, or a little after that, it's entirely possible that Teo and Turki work things out, whatever it is they have to work through.
Teo doesn't have a lot of options. If you don't work with Turki on this Devin Haney fight, you know what's going to happen? You're going to go back to Top Rank, and they're going to try to make a fight between you and Brian Norman, or you'll reject that proposition, and you'll just sit out.
Teo doesn't have a lot of options.
You'll just sit on the bench collecting dust, but not collecting any money. At this time, working with Turki represents the greatest financial value to you, and if you mess all of that up, you're back at Top Rank fighting for peanuts.
Or at least what you think are peanuts, because you think you're supposed to make more.